Hello everybody and welcome to Doc Talks, where I Doc Talk. Good afternoon. Hope you all are having a wonderful day. Hope everything's going well. Hello G-Wrath. Hello Joyce. So happy you guys can be here. How is everybody? I hope you're doing well. We're going to jump into spells today. And before I go any further, can everybody hear me? Are we doing okay? Something? Kenobi, what's up, man? You guys can tell I'm looking over at my... I could use my screen, but I was using my phone. Good. I'm glad you can hear me. This week, we're going to take another break from feats before we jump back into that. And as you can see on my pictures over here, flashing are some spell ranges. And so we're going to be doing that as well. Hey. We need to start with how we're going to describe casters. And there's two methods to do this. There's the divine and arcane casters. Those are casters that your powers come from divine powers, and casters where your powers come from traditional magical sources of kinds. And these are a little bit different as well. Joyce, I would love to help you with your spells. If I get a chance, I'll let you know, and we can go over a few of them. There are benefits and downfalls to each one of these. We're going to go through them a little bit at the end here, and maybe even talk about a few spells and how they work. I break these down as not divine and arcane casters, but traditionally, we've always done full casters, half casters, partial casters, or third casters. And recently I've accepted the pact caster because even though it's only warlock, it is very unique and worth talking about separately. Full casters, stereotypical magic users. That's all they have is magic. Both divine and arcane. That's why I said it didn't matter. As long as you don't multi-class with any of these classes, you get up to 9th level spells. This is the cool, awesome spells everybody's always trying to get to, but it is one of those long-reaching, hefty goals, I would put it. Our full casters in Redigan will be our Bard and our Sorcerer, now that we know he's a Sorcerer. Which is Tayson and Prue. And I'm going to use that. I'm going to talk about Redigan today, not just because the podcast is being released in less than 2 weeks on podcasting form, hint, but because it is worth talking and mentioning and what we do, and something that you can see when you come to our streams, and something I can answer questions on easy enough. Half casters are the ones that use a combination of spells and martial abilities. Basically, that ranges down, and subclasses might change this, and UAs from Wizards of the Coast, Unearth Arcana is what that stands for. These will be pretty much your Rangers and your Paladins. So not only do they use spells, and they have spells in there, but the highest spell level they'll ever reach is 5th level, for reasons, because it's not their whole abilities. And then you have your partial or third casters. Those are going to be more subclass casters here in earlier D&D. What is 5th edition? Sorry. But for us, it's going to be like the Arcane Trickster or the Eldritch Knight, where the magic is a backup to a backup to a backup, but their whole class is not set up for that, even if you take those subclasses. And then the other limitation is that the highest they will cast is 4th level as well. And warlocks or pack casters are very unique. They get a maximum of 4 spell slots, period. However, they always cast those spell slots at whatever their highest level is of spells, and they get them returned to them on a short rest without any subclass or abilities or anything. It's just how they work. So, very interesting. When you think about it, it really is its own little magic class. Excuse me. Each of these have ways of learning spells, and they're different ways to do this. And I don't want you to miss out on some of the role-playing opportunities. Again, Doc Talks, I know I'm talking about these things, but I really want to touch on what you can role-play with when it comes down to abilities and stuff like that. And we're talking about spells. Each different class has a different way of learning. I'm going to talk about the basics of each of the spell casting classes: bards, druids, paladins, rangers, sorcerers, warlocks, and wizards. I do understand that there are subclasses and that there are these other classes and homebrew classes. We're not going to touch on those bases. We're just going to talk about them within what we're talking about here, because everything seems to fall under the same natural rules. Warlocks are a great RP, and their mechanics are wonderful. Everything is, but we're going to be concentrating on spells. I do miss Heron because I am a very much role-playing person, and the way I was casting my spells was unique. And I'm going to share this, that we didn't do anything outside the rules. It wasn't like his magic was different. I didn't have to create a new subclass or category. We used the rules. I just changed up a few things, and I didn't, as long as my little flashiness doesn't change how the spells work, doesn't change how it's very important that the way the spells work, stuff like that, as long as you're not changing the mechanics of it, you can pretty much do anything you want. And we're going to talk a little bit about the rules when it comes to material components today, because this seems to be the question I get asked most when I help out at my local game store or other places. This is a big question, and everything's going to be DM prerogative. We talk about rules as written, so I just want you to know that. So our bards actually do learn spells, even though they're not doing it through books per se. It depends on how you want to play your bard. Your subclasses in your bards are going to be part of your little role-playing moments. And again, those who are like me that have been playing forever, I still enjoy the you can't level up until you find somebody to teach you aspect, which is really neat, and I encourage DMs to enter that into your games if you can. Again, if you're not a real heavy role-playing group, if it's a lot of combat, not a lot of role-playing, I would leave that little part out of it. Go ahead and min-max groups, etc., that just go into fights just to do that. And people, I've got a few questions on this, so let me get this out of the way really quick. Just dump it right into this episode, and hopefully people find it later. When I say min-max groups, don't worry about that. What I'm actually talking about is your XP groups, right? So if you gain XP from killing things, and we roleplay a lot, then technically I should be role-playing a Wizard Academy as, okay, well, your first thing that we're going to do today is go out to the forest, and we're going to hunt wolves, and we're going to destroy a bunch of them until you guys get better at being wizards. Because XP controls level. Think about these little things, DMs. I understand sticking to the rules. The rules are the way they are written. But even the DMG talks about milestones, and I encourage milestones. And recently, got into a talk with somebody. I actually do condone. I don't know if I would do because it would be hard, but there is a couple of DMs and storytellers out there that use character milestone, not party milestone. Thought it was really interesting that your character could level up from a milestone in its own life without everybody leveling with you. I found it very interesting. It would make a really unique group. Again, come from a time when in 2E especially, when you were leveling up, not everybody leveled at the same time. Everybody had different experience points to level up on. A little bit of a nightmare when it comes to leveling and DM responsibilities and players helping players. Was a little bit more sporadic, but it really was a unique situation when one is level 5, one is level 6, etc. Yeah, it really got me too, G-Wrath, when they did change that. But our bards learn spells, and they learn them at each level. So whenever a bard goes up a level, it learns spells. It tells in the bard chart, it tells you what the levels are on each of those. And when a bard levels, they can only lose and or replace, I should say, one spell that they know. In general, the spells they know for that level. There's no changing them out. They don't have that ability, so they have to be a little bit more precise when they're picking them out. They can only change them when they level. They can ritual cast, but they can only ritual cast the spells that they know that can be cast as rituals. Excuse me. They're not ritual book casters. And I got to look at the feat now that I'm thinking about it. I think you do get a spell book. And that would be a way to add in that. But a bard, straight bard, ritual cast only the spells that they know that they can ritual cast. So it has to be a known spell for them. Druids is different. You prepare your spell list after a long rest. So every time you take a long rest, you prepare your spell list, and you can do it all over again. This is interesting, and it has some mechanics that people look over. So one of the things that they look over is when they prepare their new list after every long rest, it's 1 minute per spell level that gives them a chance to RP. And this is where your druids could be a little bit more unique. Praying in the forest, touching trees. It doesn't have to come out of a spell book, but when they're preparing, I like the aspect of just, how to say it, I'm sorry, being unique in the situation where you are. It does give you that. And again, you can ritual cast, but it has to be on the list of spells that you've prepared. Paladins, you can prepare spells and change them after every long rest as well. I double checked that because I thought it was different. I thought once you knew it, you knew it, but it turns out after every long rest, you can change them. You only get your charisma modifier plus half your paladin level rounded down. But when you prepare your spells, it's 1 minute. And obviously for paladins, it's become a little bit more unique now that we have paladin oaths that don't have to be taken to gods if your DM plays that way. Please don't come to a DM's table and say, I'm doing this paladin because of this, and don't let them have a decision. Have a discussion with them. And if they choose that paladins in their world are committed to gods or beings on the positive energy plane, don't argue, just play along. I get the want to do some of this stuff, but just make sure that you're playing along at their table. Rangers, like the bard, you learn a spell at every level. You can change out one spell every time, but for the most part, you have the same spells over and over again. I don't know if I like the paladin mechanic personally. I'll be honest with you. I used to be that way. I used to be where I didn't like some of them. I like some of them. And then I just started reading through them and realizing how each of these, even their spell levels, but their mechanics work. And when you think about it from a resources point of view, it's not like no class has unlimited resources. I would be careful with allowing somebody to multi-class sorcerer and paladin. We can have that conversation offline. But for the most part, I try not to. As long as it's in the book, we may have to change a few things. My thing is, in my worlds, I want things to be fun, which means they're equal or balanced, and that you're playing what you want to play. If you come to me and you're like, I want to play a druid because druids are fun, or I relate to the druid, but the way that you want to play when I talk to you is not the way a druid could play, and we go through the circles, then we have to try to talk about it and look at other things. When it comes to spell casting and their abilities, there's nature clerics, which might fit a little bit more to what you're looking at. But there's a plethora of things. But I'd be careful on the I don't like the way mechanics are, because it's a balancing act of resources and everybody has their part to play in the game. I use this as role playing. A lot of people, it's called a role playing game, but to be honest, back in the 70s when they designed this, it was just a more streamlined strategy game. And that is the basis of D&D. What we have today is now trying to get these things together. The non-deity thing is another thing. It's not a mechanic. It's something that they put into the game to help you as a DM with your table. And I wouldn't say no straight up to a player. And I've allowed it at some of my tables, the no god deity thing. However, I twist it and let them know that whether they want to acknowledge it or not, it's like a warlock pact to me. Even though doesn't have the benefits of the warlock. We're getting a little off on that one. But again, cool roleplay moments, especially for your paladins, your clerics. I skipped clerics on this too. I'm sorry. I have to go back. But it's a minute per spell level that they're preparing for the day. Rangers, we went through that. Or did we? I don't know. You learn a spell at every level. You can change out one spell every time you level. But again, you keep it the way it is. Cleric, yes, I'm here. We'll talk about that. I skipped it, so I will spend the rest of the time when I get to the end on that today, I promise. Sorcerers, because, and each of these are a reason, but sorcerers are an innate spell ability. They have those same things on them. You have your list. You don't get to prepare it every day. You have it for your level. When you level up, you can change one spell out and then have spells up to the level that you're at. Warlocks do the same thing, and for the same reason as sorcerer. It's more innate or given to you, so there's nothing that you're going. But again, the unique thing about the warlocks is every short rest you get all your spell slots back, but you have less resources to work with, but they're more powerful resources. There's a lot to it. And then wizards are the one that everybody thinks of when they think of this, and it's different because wizards have spell books. So they do prepare spells for the day after a long rest, studying their spell book if it's in there. There's actually rules for wizards to learn new spells. It's not like the spell book has every spell in existence in it. You find spell scrolls, you go to a place of arcane study, and you attempt to put it into your book. You get it as many spells as your intelligence modifier plus your wisdom level. 1 minute per spell level to get it, to learn it for the day. And the unique part is because you have a spell book, you can ritual cast any spell that's in your spell book. Unlike the other ritual casters where you have to have it prepared for the day, you actually get to do it right out of your spell book. It's very easy. It's wonderful. I understand that 5e is very streamlined, and it's funny to me that some people talk about how complicated it is, but I think we're just in a day and age where we don't want to think about it. We just want to do whatever makes sense. But the rules are there for a reason, so I would look into that. Verbal, somatic, and material components. So, excuse me. There is nothing that says you cannot come up with your own components except for the material components, and we'll get to that. Video games did spoil people, I agree. When it comes to somatic, let's go back to the verbal. When it talks about verbal components, it's the phrase or verbal components are things that you say to cast a spell. You can look and change that. There's no rule that says this is what you're saying for the somatic component when you cast a spell. You could be as funny or as serious, but I encourage you to have something that you say for your spells. Good luck, wizards, because you have so many spells after a while. They had clerics as well. But it would be neat to just say like a prayer if you're a cleric, or as a paladin, when you use your divine smite, that there is a phrase that triggers that. Somatic components is the symbols your hands or your fingers do, and that's why a lot of people have to have a free hand to cast. These are cool RP moments as well. And I'll give you an example. Magic has her Tarot Bard in Redigan, coming soon to a podcast player near you. She has a deck of cards. Her deck of cards is her somatic component, and we made it that way. It's a very unique component that she uses. It's also her spell focus, which we'll talk about a little bit here. And it is unique in its design, and I think she's doing a wonderful job putting that together as well. But there's nothing, again, that says in your somatic components. Now, I've had wizards and sorcerers in the past, and my somatic component, and I think I've said it a few times, just in my little story elements when I talk about spells being cast in Redigan, is the sigil, and the sigil stays with the magic energy from it while the fingers are moving through the air. I love it. It's just a great way to look at it. Excuse me. These are great story and RP things, though. It doesn't have to be. It can be what I'm talking about with that, but there needs to be something that you do. And for tables to visualize in your visual players, it's better if they can hear and see your somatic and components. They get used to it after a while, and you will as well. DMs encourage this of your players, and players, please use these. We would all love you for it. Material components are going to be a little more tricky, so let's talk about them. So, without any other exception or rule, when we cast a spell, we need a certain part. Some spells, it'll say M for material component, and then it will list the components you need to cast a spell. Some of them have a gold word, or a monetary value, we'll call it, or a money value. Some of them are just something that you have. If the spell doesn't say that it consumes it, then it doesn't consume it. However, if it has a monetary value, the spell consumes it. I haven't found that exception, but I really haven't gone looking for it specifically, and you're more than welcome to look it up, but I believe that's true. We can offset the material components, so you don't have to have a bag of material components, even though I will say that I love that Liam did it in Critical Role, and that he's very much using it is wonderful to me. But you can use a spell focus to overcome material components with an exception. So you don't need any other the material components if you're using some kind of spell focus to cast your spells. However, if it has a monetary value to it, you still need that component. Now, your DM might say, no, we're not going to do that, which is fine. I am not here to override or tell a DM what they're supposed to do. But the rules as written, it does not. Especially if a spell consumes something, it needs that. And your spell focus can't be that. There are ways around that the DM, or DMs, I would encourage you as well, is more expensive spell focuses, or little gems they can put into the spell focus. Work with what you got, but the rules as written is with the spell focus and something of value, monetary value, actually assigned, like 250 gold a diamond. These things need to be there as well with your material components. If you're playing as a caster, I would encourage you to know your spells. And again, I've talked about this before, but have a cheat sheet. And all your cheat sheet should have is your spells that you have for the day. Is it a DC? And possibly put what kind of DC. So DC WIS is a wisdom save. Or is it an attack roll? Tell yourself that you have an attack roll to do that. I'm excited, Joyce. Cheat sheets are super helpful. It doesn't have to be specific. Again, is it a DC roll or is it an attack roll? Does it do healing or does it do damage? If it's something else, just leave it blank and you'll know. Now, you still need to have your player's handbook or spell cards around with the longer description. Each spell has limitations or things that happen or need to happen for the spell to be fulfilled, and that needs to be around. But I would use the cheat sheet just to be ready while you're going through your turns. It would also encourage you to use your spells outside of combat. I understand it's a resource, and we all get into this game, know it's a game, and we've got to play the game. But it is just a resource. And when I say it's just a resource, sometimes some of those resources could be useful outside of combat situations. And don't be afraid to use them outside of combat situations. Sometimes it will help you out of that combat situation. Now, I promised Joyce, because I skipped the cleric when I put this together, that I was going to open up the cleric. And let's just go straight to it and do it straight out of the book here. Yeah, just randomly having a player's handbook around. That's just how I am. I don't know how I skipped it. Clerics is my go-to. It was one of my first ones. All right. So we're going to go through this. Again, it's one of those that we're going to prepare a list of spells for the day after you finish a long rest is actually in the book. 1 minute per level in the spells. I'm going to check Paladin while I'm here too. But you prepare the amount of spells that you can prepare is your wisdom modifier plus your cleric level. And again, when you prepare these spells, they have to be for a level of spell slot that you have at that point. You do regain all expended spell slots after a long rest, which is good. So it has that in it as well. So, boop-a-doop-a-doop. There is nothing on this that I see. So, you can use any of the cleric spells. I like to RP this as my prayer book. If you're using a prayer wheel, you can also have a prayer book as well, but I would do that. So after every long rest, you could change your spells. You have to add up the total number of spell slots you're using and spend that much time in prayer, or however you want to do that. You can ritual cast spells, but you have to do it with a spell that you've actually prepared for that day. So, again, wizards are the only ones that have the spell book for that. You actually have to prepare the spell for that day, and you can ritual it if it has a ritual tag to it. So, and it also says that you can use your holy symbol as a spell casting focus right out of the book. So, you have that. But remember, if you're using a spell focus, that you still need the material or monetary material components when you go to cast. And some people just shun this off because they want everything now. I encourage you not to. Plus, it gives you a reason to have that gold. I've been in so many different games where we have like a god-awful amount of gold and nothing to use it on. There's just no reason, because at some point you're even overdoing any kind of living. Okay, so I come back to here to my Paladin one. You prepare a list of spells that are available for you to cast. You do it with your charisma plus half your Paladin level rounded down, and you prepare it after a long rest. Yes. I don't know why. I always thought it was once you had it, you had it. And again, they have the spell focus as their holy symbol as well, right here at the end of the thing. So, if you have any questions on that, divine casters, which are clerics, paladins, and druids, are considered divine casters, even though it's not necessarily from a god or goddess, but as magic does, it's from Gaia, the mother, or the earth itself, granting her that. These usually have like a plethora. So just going through this, each cleric subclass that you choose has a list of spells that you automatically get. You know those no matter what, and you can't change them, but they don't count towards the spells that you know. At least, if I remember right, they don't. Let's double check that while we're talking about it. Oof. I have the book. All right, let's see. Bump, bump. Let's see where they talk about it, actually. I was not prepared. Again, for some odd reason, I skipped this, and that's so stupid. I don't know why I did. But I did. Green Acres is the place to be. I will tell you that I have never... I count them as extra spells. But I'm trying to find where it says here. And I can't find it. I'd have to look it up. And I will do that. I will get back to you, Joyce, in the thing. But talk to your DM if you're playing a cleric. But I believe the cleric spells that you get from your domain is free to you. And then you also get a list of other spells that you can prepare. The ones that you get that are free to you, you can't change those. You can't swap them out. You have those spells on your spell list, plus the other ones that you know. At least it would always be at my table that way. And you're welcome. Not a problem. And if you have questions about spells and like looking at them, your DM, specifically Mike, Nerdworks, who owns said channel here, and is a wonderful person, is a very good DM and really has a good knowledge base of spells. To be honest, I should have invited him here to be Doc for today, but I didn't, and here we are. So, but I hope that helps. He really is a world of knowledge. When you cast spells, some of them say cone or straight line or target. You have to read each spell on that. As you see on the maps, pictures I have right over here. And for those of you that are listening to this in podcast later, I, on the stream, have little things that are popping up. There were different resources I found of ways to measure, and there's actually going to be a link that I'm going to share in the podcast of this one right here that's on screen right now. Is actually from a company that makes an opaque or see-through one with those lines on it, so you could look at it if you're playing at a table, and they are wonderful. When you use squares or hexes, they're a little different on how they pattern out. Hexes are a little bit more accurate, I would say. If something says it's 5 feet of you in a cube, it's just every 5-foot hex around you, every hex being 5. Where if it's a square, it goes across. This helps with cones because a hex cone is a cone. The cone is a cone, but it's jagged cone coming out of like a 30-foot cone. And depending on the way you're looking, as you notice in some of these, some of them look distorted. There are rules to that. Your DM should know those rules, be able to count them out to see. Or if you say, you know, you're the one casting the spell, so you should know, like, if I'm casting at this angle, what it would look like as well. But each little angle, each of these things has a reason, and it's in the rules and marked because everything needs to be in the rules and marked. DMs can change. You could be different. You could use different methods yourself. I encourage you not to worry about that as much. I've made a divot in my thing and my tier won't stay. I wouldn't change a lot of these rules or how they work. It's fine, and I've said this before, to change something from like a cone to a line, but know the spells that are like it to change the damage and everything else for that. When it comes to monsters, you could do that. But try not to do that too much with the spells. But if somebody's using a spell and it doesn't seem like, that's the way that the rule says it is, remember we have that rule of cool, and I want you to use that as much as with your players casting a spell as you do with your characters. The NPCs are your characters. Sometimes you need to have rule of cool. And again, the Redigan podcast had a few of that. Some of my NPCs have powers that don't exist in the book, but I thought it would be neat for them to have a little bit extra. Spells are fun, but spells are difficult. Spells come with a lot of rules. There's a lot of words in spells. There's major rules like you have to be able to see a target, the distance of the target. If something's a cone, a line, a radius, these things change. And some people, like I'm great at math, so I know the 15-foot radius is a 30-foot diameter circle on me, and it makes it easy for me to look and see who it gets. But sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes it doesn't make sense, and that's fine. That's why they make these charts. And no DM is going to be mad if you print off one of these charts and bring it to the table, or if you find cardboard. I didn't even think about it. I actually have a cardboard circle with a square cut out of it that I use for one character to make sure, because we actually played without the 5-foot maps. We played with 30-foot was, 30-foot was 1-inch squares. Yeah, 6 inches or something like that. And it was fun to do. It was unique. It was something better for somebody like me who's played the game a million times, and it gave me a little something extra to do. DMs, I want you to remember that you're in this game as much as your players are. And if you want to have a good table, you have to take time for yourself as well. We play our characters, and we have so many of them, and don't beat yourself up if you get upset, or if you miss something. Excuse me, not upset. If you miss something from your character, don't beat yourself up for that. It's not worth it. If you want to dazzle a little bit, as much as you're willing to give your characters the rule of cool, make sure to also do rule of cool for you. The biggest reason things fall apart in games is, everybody has the horror story of people that just couldn't make it anymore on that day, but the real thing is a burnout of DMs. And you need to take time for you. And as you noticed, this week in Redigan, we didn't record yesterday. I was badly putting together my Hedwig Lego set and talking D&D and Redigan to anybody who was there, and I had to pull it half apart because I think I did a piece wrong. But we took a day off because people needed a day off, because they needed a chance to decompress. In my other game, we actually took almost 4 weeks off in a row, in the one that I'm turning into a novel, because one person was having really bad times at work. Is it fair to everybody else? It wouldn't be fair if they would have showed up, because their RP would have been off, their character would have been not the best, etc., etc., etc. Don't do that. Make sure that everybody is happy, things are going well. Make sure that you're not burning out, and that you're taking time for yourself, and that you're doing things for yourself. These are important things, and sometimes we forget them. And I don't want you to forget them. I want you guys to love and enjoy this game as much as I do, for how much it touches people and does things for people, and has wonderful thing. Self-care is eating nachos. But sometimes self-care is just unplugging from everything. If you're ever feeling overwhelmed and you're playing games and reading books, but you're really overwhelmed, I want you to ask yourself, how much time away from being connected to the internet do you have? Because your brain can get overloaded with that. I also want to say thank you if you're following me on TikTok. I broke 550, so I'm super excited now. And found a way into a community, and helping a new community I haven't been part of, the Magic the Gathering community, to create better content for Magic the Gathering. And I think it was important. Self-care. Do you unplug? Love everybody. Do you guys have any other questions about spells? I'll wait a second. I have 0 drop, but I know that there's auto lag, so I'll wait a second. And put this back on in case you do, so I can read it. When do I get my chaos bead? That's not a spell, sir. I'll answer that whenever I will cover magical items, and you are more than welcome to ask me about magical items. It's a magical item, is it not? This is about spells. I would like you to stay within the confines of what we're talking about. If you're in my server, you are more than welcome to ask me questions about D&D at any time. I actually have a spot for past Doc Talk questions. So if you're watching this, you're more than welcome to come join the server if you can follow the rules and go there. These wonderful people are there as well. G-Rath, Joyce, Mike, as well as wonderful other people. There's a plethora of different nerd knowledge there. And I honestly think you should do that. I am going to go ahead and roll my credits now. And we're going to run right into a raid for another channel, which I'll set up here in a second while this is running. But I want you all to remember, again, love one another. I want you to keep it nerdy. I want you to live your dreams. Later.